Rain had always comforted Eleanor Hayes, for 15 years. Whenever life became overwhelming, whenever another pregnancy test came back negative, whenever another doctor gently apologized, she would stand by the large bay window of their London home, watching raindrops race down the glass. And every single time, her husband would wrap his arms around her from behind. "You always look so peaceful when it rains," Daniel would whisper. She would smile. "Because you're here." For 15 years, Daniel Hayes had been her entire world. He wasn't just her husband. He was her best friend, her safest place, the love she believed people only found once in a lifetime. Their marriage wasn't perfect. No marriage ever was. They argued over small things, who forgot to buy milk, who worked too late, who left the lights on, but every disagreement ended the same way. "I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry." Then laughter. Then laughter. Always laughter. There was only one thing missing, a child. For 15 years. They tried. Doctors, specialists, treatments, prayers, nothing. Every hospital report came back the same. "Eleanor, you're perfectly healthy." Daniel's results were just as reassuring. There are no fertility issues. No one could explain why pregnancy never came. Sometimes, late at night, Eleanor would cry quietly after Daniel had fallen asleep. She believed she had failed him, failed their family, failed the future they had dreamed about together, but every time he noticed, he would wipe away her tears. "Don't ever blame yourself." His voice was always gentle. "If we're meant to become parents, life will find its own way." She believed him, because she believed him about everything. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, her entire world ended. The phone rang while she was organizing invoices at her small interior design company. She almost ignored it. Unknown number. She answered anyway. "Mrs. Hayes?" "Yes?" The silence on the other end lasted only a second, but somehow it changed her life forever. "I'm calling from St. Thomas Hospital." Her heartbeat slowed. "There has been an accident." The drive to the hospital felt unreal. Traffic lights, rain, sirens, people walking home from work. How could the world continue moving when hers had already stopped? She reached the emergency department breathless. A doctor met her. One look at his face, and she already knew, "I'm so sorry." Those 3 words shattered everything. Daniel hadn't survived. The funeral came and went like a blur. Flowers, black clothes, sympathy cards, people telling her to stay strong, people promising time would heal, but time didn't heal. It only made the silence inside the house louder. His coffee mug remained untouched. His favorite chair stayed exactly where he'd left it. His jacket still hung beside the front door. Every corner of the house carried pieces of him, and every piece broke her heart all over again. 2 weeks later, a courier knocked on her door. "I'm here on behalf of Whitmore Legal Group, Daniel's lawyer." He handed her a neatly sealed box. "These are Mr. Hayes' personal belongings and legal documents." She thanked him softly, closed the door, and carried the box to the dining table. Inside were his watch, his wallet, a leather notebook, insurance papers, tax documents, employment records. She carefully stacked everything into neat piles. Then, a cream-colored envelope slipped onto the floor. She picked it up. Across the front, typed in black letters, were the words, "Emergency Beneficiary File." She frowned. Daniel had always told her she was his only beneficiary. Curious, she opened it. The first page listed her name, nothing unusual. Then she turned to the second page, and everything inside her froze. There, beneath her own name, was another beneficiary. Sophie Bennett, age 8 years old. Relationship, daughter. Eleanor stared at the page, once, twice, again. No. This had to be a mistake. Daniel, her Daniel, didn't have a daughter. He couldn't. He wouldn't. Her hands began to tremble. The paper slipped from her fingers. She whispered into the empty house, "Who is Sophie?" Eleanor didn't move. She remained seated at the dining table, the beneficiary file still open before her. Daughter. The word refused to make sense. It couldn't. Daniel had never lied to her. Had he? Her breathing became uneven. "No," she whispered to the empty room. "There has to be some mistake." She grabbed her phone immediately, called the number printed on the document. A woman answered. "Good afternoon. My name is Eleanor Hayes." Her voice trembled. "I received my husband's beneficiary documents." A pause. "I think there's been an error." The woman remained silent for a moment before replying. "What seems to be the issue, Mrs. Hayes?" "There is a child listed." Another pause. "Sophie Bennett." The woman hesitated. I'm afraid there is no mistake. Eleanor felt her stomach twist. The beneficiary information was personally updated by Mr. Daniel Hayes 3 years ago. 3 years. 3 years. He had known, and never told her. Her hand slowly lowered the phone. The call ended. The silence inside the house became unbearable. Every memory she had shared with Daniel suddenly felt different. Every business trip, every late meeting, every unexpected phone call. Had he been living another life while holding her every night? Tears blurred her vision, not only because he was gone, but because she no longer knew the man she had buried. A loud knock echoed through the house. She wiped her tears quickly. Another knock, then a third. Reluctantly, she opened the front door. Standing outside was a woman in her early 40s. Beside her, a little girl, around 8 years old, dark brown curls, large hazel eyes, tiny fingers tightly gripping a worn teddy bear. The woman offered a sympathetic smile. "Mrs. Eleanor Hayes." "Yes. My name is Margaret. I work with Children's Family Services." Eleanor frowned. Before she could speak, Margaret gently rested a hand on the little girl's shoulder. "This," she said softly, "is Sophie." The world stopped. The little girl looked up shyly. Their eyes met. Eleanor's breath caught. Those eyes, she had seen them before every morning, looking back at her across the breakfast table, Daniel's eyes. Margaret continued quietly. "Mr. Buck Hayes was listed as Sophie's legal guardian." Eleanor stared in disbelief. "I don't understand." Margaret lowered her voice. "Sophie's mother passed away 4 days ago." Silence. "The only surviving guardian listed in our records," she hesitated, "was your husband." Another silence. "But after Mr. Hayes' accident," she looked gently toward Eleanor, "that responsibility legally transfers to you." "I can't." The words escaped before Eleanor even realized she had spoken them. "I can't do this." Margaret nodded kindly. "I understand this is overwhelming, but there isn't anyone else." Eleanor looked down at the little girl. Sophie hadn't spoken once. She simply stood there, quiet, terrified, clutching her teddy bear tighter. "Finally," she whispered, "are you my daddy's wife?" The innocent question shattered something inside Eleanor. She couldn't answer. Margaret handed over a small pink backpack. "These are all of Sophie's belongings." Eleanor stared at it. One backpack, one teddy bear, that was all the little girl had left. Against every instinct, she stepped aside. "You can come in." Sophie entered carefully. Looking around the unfamiliar house, she stopped beside the family photographs displayed on the hallway table. One picture caught her attention. Daniel, standing beside Eleanor on their 10th wedding anniversary. Sophie smiled softly. Daddy looked happy there. Eleanor felt tears sting her eyes again. So, she had known him. She had really known him. That evening, neither of them ate very much. Sophie quietly pushed vegetables around her plate. Eleanor couldn't bring herself to touch hers. The house felt painfully unfamiliar, not because of the little girl, but because every wall suddenly seemed filled with secrets. Later that night, after finally putting Sophie to bed in the guest room, Eleanor walked downstairs. She opened Daniel's leather notebook. Most pages contained work notes, meeting schedules, project sketches, nothing unusual. Then, a folded photograph slipped onto the floor. She picked it up. It showed Daniel, holding baby Sophie in a hospital room. His smile was brighter than she had ever seen. Written carefully on the back were 5 heartbreaking words. "Forgive me, one day, Ellie." Eleanor's knees nearly gave way. She sank slowly onto the floor. Her tears finally fell without restraint, because for the first time, she realized her husband hadn't just been hiding a child, he had been carrying a secret for years. And somehow, she knew this wasn't the whole truth. Not even close. The next morning, Eleanor barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the photograph. Daniel, holding a baby, smiling, looking happier than she had ever seen him. And those 5 words, "Forgive me one day, Ellie." She quietly folded the photograph, placed it back inside the notebook, then looked toward the guest room. Sophie was still asleep, curled around a teddy bear, looking so small, so innocent. Eleanor's heart ached, not because she hated the child, because she couldn't understand how Daniel had hidden her. Over the next few days, life became a blur. She contacted hospitals, schools, government offices, trying to trace Sophie's mother. Every document led to the same name, Claire Bennett, age 34, deceased, no surviving relatives, no parents, no siblings, nothing. It was as if the woman had disappeared from the world. long before she died. Eleanor searched social media, old newspaper archives, even private investigators. Nothing explained how Claire Bennett knew Daniel. Nothing explained why Daniel had become Sophie's legal guardian. Nothing. Meanwhile, her own life was collapsing. Bills continued arriving. Clients began cancelling contracts. Her interior design company had already been struggling before Daniel died. Now, without his financial support, everything was falling apart. Employees quietly resigned, projects stopped, suppliers demanded payment. Within weeks, her accountant delivered the news she feared most. "We have less than 30 days. Eleanor looked up. "What happens after that?" The accountant lowered his eyes. "We declare bankruptcy." She drove home in silence, completely numb. When she entered the house, Sophie was sitting on the living room floor, drawing with coloured pencils. She looked up immediately. "I made this for you." Eleanor accepted the drawing. It showed 3 people, a little girl, a man, and a woman, all holding hands. Above them, Sophie had written carefully in childish handwriting, "My family." Eleanor's chest tightened. She quickly looked away before Sophie could see the tears. That evening, she made another impossible decision. She drove Sophie to a children's home. The building looked warm, safe, kind. The director welcomed them gently. "We'll take good care of her." Sophie looked up at Eleanor. Her little hand reached for hers. "Am I staying here?" Eleanor couldn't answer. The director smiled kindly. "You'll make lots of new friends." Sophie slowly nodded, then quietly asked, "Did I do something wrong?" Eleanor felt something inside her break. "No." The little girl's voice trembled. "Why doesn't anyone want me?" Silence. "I already lost Mommy." Tiny tears filled her eyes. "Did Daddy stop loving me too?" Eleanor could no longer breathe. She rushed forward, dropped to her knees, wrapped both arms around Sophie. No. Her own tears fell freely. "No one is leaving you." She stood, picked up Sophie's little backpack, took her tiny hand and walked straight back out of the orphanage. That night, for the first time, Sophie fell asleep beside Eleanor on the sofa, still clutching her teddy bear. Eleanor gently brushed curls away from the little girl's face, then whispered, "I don't know who you are to my husband, but none of this is your fault." The next morning, reality returned. The company, the debt, the bankruptcy. She had one final option. Daniel's employer, Alex Engineering Limited, had promised to discuss death benefits and compensation. She gathered every document, straightened her blazer, held Sophie's hand, and walked into the towering glass headquarters. The receptionist greeted her politely. "Mrs. Hayes, the CEO has agreed to meet you personally." Eleanor blinked. "The CEO?" "Yes," he insisted. Minutes later, the elevator doors opened onto the executive floor. Luxury surrounded them. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking London. Elegant silence. She was escorted into a spacious office. A tall man stood with his back to them, looking out across the city skyline. His charcoal suit was perfectly tailored. Silver streaks touched the sides of his dark hair. Power seemed to follow him without effort. The receptionist spoke softly. "Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Eleanor Hayes is here." The man slowly turned around. His calm expression immediately landed on Sophie. He froze, completely. His eyes widened. The colour drained from his face. He took one slow step forward, unable to look away from the little girl. Sophie stared back nervously. The man whispered, almost to himself, "Impossible." Then his voice shook. "Emily?" Sophie frowned. "My name is Sophie." The CEO's breathing became uneven. He looked from Sophie to Eleanor, then back again. His eyes settled on the little girl's face. The same eyes, the same smile, the same tiny dimple. He knew those features. He had seen them before, every single day in his younger sister. Slowly, he whispered the words that made Eleanor's heart stop. "She's my sister's daughter." Silence consumed the room. Eleanor stared at him. "What did you just say?" The room fell silent. No one spoke. No one moved. Eleanor simply stared at the man standing before her. "She's my sister's daughter." The words echoed through her mind again and again and again. Finally, she found her voice. "What do you mean?" The CEO slowly lowered himself into his chair. His face had gone pale. "My name is Alexander Bennett." He looked at Sophie, then back at Eleanor. "My younger sister was Claire Bennett." Eleanor's heart pounded. "Claire? The woman listed as Sophie's mother." Alexander nodded slowly. "Yes." Silence. "So Daniel?" Her voice trembled. "Knew your sister?" Alexander closed his eyes for a brief moment. "He loved her." Eleanor felt the air leave her lungs. Alexander stood and walked toward the large window. It happened 16 years ago. My sister and Daniel met long before he married you. They fell deeply in love. Eleanor listened without breathing. They were planning a future together. Then Daniel was offered a career opportunity overseas. He left for only a few months. Alexander's voice grew heavier. Neither of them knew Claire was already pregnant. When Daniel returned, Alexander continued quietly. Claire had disappeared. Eleanor frowned. Disappeared? Alexander nodded. Our father never approved of their relationship. He wanted Claire to marry into another wealthy family. When she refused, his jaw tightened, she left. No one knew where she went, not even me. For years, Alexander continued, Daniel searched. He hired investigators. He contacted everyone who had ever known Claire. He never stopped looking, but he found nothing. He believed she was gone forever, Eleanor whispered. And then he met me, Alexander nodded. Yes. He eventually accepted that life had moved on. He married you. And by every account, Alexander smiled sadly, he truly loved you. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Then Sophie? Alexander took a slow breath. 8 years ago, Claire became seriously ill. She knew she didn't have much time. Before she died, she finally contacted Daniel. Eleanor covered her mouth. He arrived at the hospital. Alexander's voice softened, and for the first time, he met his daughter. He wanted to tell you. Alexander walked toward his desk, opened a drawer, removed a sealed envelope. My lawyers found this after his accident. Across the front, written in Daniel's familiar handwriting, were the words, for Eleanor. Her trembling hands accepted it. Slowly, she opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. My Ellie, if you're reading this, then I waited too long. And for that, I am deeply sorry. I never betrayed you. I never stopped loving you. Claire belonged to my past. You became my future. When she came back into my life, she wasn't asking me to love her again. She was asking me to protect our daughter. I wanted to tell you everything, every single day. But I was afraid, not because I didn't trust you, because I couldn't bear the thought of losing you too. I kept waiting for the right moment. I was wrong. If life has brought Sophie to you, please don't see her as proof of my betrayal. See her as the innocent child who lost both her parents. She deserves the love neither of us ever expected. And if anyone could give her that love, it's you. Forgive me. Forever yours, Daniel. The letter slipped from Eleanor's hands. She broke down, not because Daniel had lied, but because he had carried such a heavy burden, completely alone. A tiny hand gently touched hers. She looked down. Sophie stood beside her, looking frightened. Are you crying because of me? Eleanor immediately pulled her into a tight embrace. No, her voice cracked. I'm crying because your daddy loved us both. Months passed. With Alexander's help, the truth became public. Claire's medical records, DNA results, legal documents, every piece finally fit together. Alexander also invested in Eleanor's struggling company, not out of pity, but because she was now the only family Sophie had left. Slowly, the business recovered. Clients returned, employees came back, life began again. One spring afternoon, Eleanor stood beside Daniel's grave. Fresh white lilies rested against the stone. Sophie quietly slipped her tiny hand into hers. Daddy would like these flowers. Eleanor smiled through tears. Yes, I think he would. She looked at Daniel's name carved into the stone, then whispered softly. You left me with the greatest secret of your life. A gentle breeze moved through the cemetery. She smiled, and somehow, she looked down at Sophie. It became the greatest gift I never knew I needed. Sophie squeezed her hand, then looked up with hopeful eyes. Can I still call you Mommy? Tears filled Eleanor's eyes once more. She knelt, pressed a gentle kiss to Sophie's forehead. You always could. The little girl smiled, the brightest smile Eleanor had ever seen. Together, hand in hand, they walked away from the cemetery, not forgetting the past, but finally walking toward the future. The end.